For 160 years, Moore College of Art and Design has flourished as the nation's only art and design school for women to lead the way in educating its students for a wide range of art and design majors that respond to contemporary needs.
Moore College of Art and Design was founded in 1848 by a very visionary woman, Sarah Peter, who was in tune with the times and wanted to educate women for careers in the burgeoning textile industry. 1848 was also the same year as the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, where women first got together to draw up a Women's Bill of Rights, which included the right of women to vote.
Moore was originally called the Philadelphia School of Design for Women. Over the years, the school's name and location changed. In 1989, it became Moore College of Art and Design, with its current home on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway in Logan Square, where students are immersed in arts and culture. As the school grew and became internationally known, it inspired the startup of other women's art colleges. Today, just Moore remains as the only all-women's art college in the country.
We also were the first art school to educate women to be art educators, to be able to teach in classrooms.
Over the years, opportunities for women to exhibit their work remain somewhat limited. Several Moore graduates from the 1890s through the 1940s formed the Philadelphia 10 to provide exhibition venues for women. That focus continues today through the galleries at Moore and at the Kimmel Center and CBS, which showcase student, faculty, and alumni work. Moore's Art Shop is the only one of its kind to sell the work of students and graduates. Over the decades, Moore alumni's notable accomplishments have been as diverse as they are creative. Moore graduates became painters, sculptors, illustrators, photographers, and textile and fashion designers.
The 1930s were a time of a lot of innovation. A Moore graduate designed a postage stamp. About that time, Edith Kaplan was made art director of a major advertising agency. So Moore graduates have been firsts in many ways throughout the decades. The clue to having a long, rich history and a promising future is to continue to change and be receptive to changes in the times and keep our focus on our central mission, which is educating women for careers in the visual arts.
Throughout its history, the college has partnered with industry and business to provide workplace experience for students.
Since Moore has been so effective in educating women for careers in the visual arts, more women have gone on to start their own businesses or to be key players in companies and businesses and corporations all over this country. As we celebrate our 160th anniversary, Moore is really excited about our present, which includes planning for 3 new graduate programs. And we're also excited about all the new endowed scholarships. This year, Jane Walentis, one of our alums, endowed a $1 million scholarship for our students. So that is so important to guarantee and support more as we move into the future. We also, several years ago, started the Visionary Woman Awards to highlight and bring to public attention some of the women who have had a major impact on the visual arts.
Moore's Visionary Woman Award honors an outstanding woman who's had a powerful impact on the worlds of art and design. Since 2003, the award's esteemed recipients embody excellence and leadership in their fields.
The women we have selected as Visionary Woman awardees are women who have had a national impact with their work and their leadership.
Proceeds from the annual award gala support Visionary Woman Award scholarships.
We want our students to see themselves as women who can also take risks, address some of the barriers that are in the way, and persist in the pursuit of their passion and their vision.
In 2003, 3 women were chosen as the inaugural recipients of the Visionary Woman Awards. Architect and urban planner Denise Scott Brown, Jane Golden, director of Philadelphia's Mural Arts Program, and fashion designer Adrienne Vittadini.
Adrienne Vittadini and her family fled communist Hungary when she was 12 years old. They eventually came to Philadelphia, where Adrienne enrolled at Moore College of Art and Design.
Moore changed my life. I really feel that way. It was a new chapter. I loved the intimacy of the school and the interaction with our professors. There was a nurturing quality about the school. It just evolved after that, but it was a new beginning.
Following her education at Moore, Adrienne continued her fashion studies and worked in Italy. She later worked in New York as an assistant designer, quickly rose to success, and with her husband, Gigi, founded their own company in 1979. Adrienne's success may have been due in part to her family background, which, while filled with culture and privilege, encouraged hard work and self-discipline.
I had no room to fail. I think in the back of my mind, that was very important, that whatever I did, I had to excel. Now, I never had this vision that I was going to have a big company. I never had that dream. Initially, it was just to do my best every day.
Adrienne's dreams evolved over time and were influenced by her education at Moore, her strong work ethic, and her innate sense of style.
Adrienne, she had an innate sense of glamour that was really, very inspirational to everybody. She was just so hardworking and disciplined and talented. We all knew that she would be very successful.
Adrienne's love of art, architecture, and design influences her changing vision.
In all the arts, because I think we're constantly searching and we're inquisitive and we have an open mind, so it was something very natural. And it is true, I was very lucky. Whatever I loved this season, somehow it became very strongly fashion, the following season.
When Adrienne and her husband sold their fashion house in 1996, she embarked on a new career as a leading interior designer.
I can say right now, my passion is everything to do with architecture and the home.
Adrienne's leadership talent lies in making her artistic passions successful design enterprises. For over 40 years, Denise Scott Brown has been an international leader in architecture and urban planning, as well as a teacher and writer. She believes leadership is an evolutionary process that requires listening carefully to others.
I'm not sure that leadership, like vision, is something you aspire to or grow into. And I think the teaching I did helped me a great deal.
Denise Scott Brown's unique approach was influenced by her early years in South Africa and England in the 1940s and 50s, and later in the U.S. From the beginning, she was not daunted by the mostly masculine world of architecture.
I knew I wanted to be an architect from about the age of 4 or 5 because my mother had studied architecture, so that was pretty easy, and I thought it was women's work.
Denise's desire to learn more about urban planning led her to the University of Pennsylvania. There she met and later married architect Robert Venturi. They discovered they shared many artistic beliefs, foremost the necessity to combine urban planning and the social sciences with architectural design.
We shared an interest in mannerism, which is a way of looking at architecture, sees breaking of the rules as not just license, but as a creative freedom that you need to achieve other aims.
Together, Denise and Robert formed Venturi Scott Brown and Associates, one of the most respected architectural firms in the world. Denise Scott Brown's vision remains as unique today as when the company began. A wide range of institutions seeks her expertise.
We guard our first impressions very carefully. And our first impressions will be a lot of them to do with the context of the place. And as we first go there, we kind of like to look at our eyes as cameras, which get a kind of a glimpse, a vision. And if I had had a vision as a child when I didn't, I suppose my vision would be to do with making things and making them beautiful, but using your good mind to do it as well as your artistic creativity.
No one knows about creative collaboration better than muralist Jane Golden. She united artists, communities, city government, and students to transform Philadelphia's anti-graffiti network into a thriving mural arts program.
When I started doing murals, I really felt that murals were powerful because they make art accessible to people. I don't really buy into the notion that art has to be behind the walls of galleries and museums, or that art is for certain people and not for other people.
Jane was entranced by the size and scale of murals as a young girl and later studied art at Stanford University. An opportunity to paint a mural in Los Angeles led to her appreciation of the far-reaching impact of the medium.
I don't think that my vision had real clarity until I came to Philadelphia. I had 1,000 kids assigned to me. It was daunting. And it was this grassroots, somewhat dysfunctional, disorganized program with a lot of spirit and meaning. And in essence, we asked people to take a leap of faith. It was our vision, it was our idea, but we didn't know how other people, what they would think about it. There was a shift, this sort of consciousness shift, where people started to see themselves in terms of their potential. And that's what was so incredible. And that helped really refine our vision. We can bring them art, bring them beauty, and by extension, bring them hope.
Not only has Jane brought hope into communities where hope was dim, but she has also given opportunities to hundreds of artists, including students from Moore College of Art and Design.
One of the wonderful things I like about working with Moore College of Art is that I feel a connection with their mission. And I feel that what we're doing here at Mural Arts furthers that mission. It is providing opportunities to young women and providing with the opportunities to go out in the world and make a difference, and that's important.
I would say Jane Golden's dedication and humbleness and no barriers. Her vision of not seeing any barriers and just pushing the limits, and not taking no for an answer. And that's what inspires me from Jane.
My father believed in equal rights for women, and my mother worked from the time I was a child. I was inculcated with the idea that it was important to make a contribution. And so I always wanted to be an artist, and I always wanted to make a contribution through art.
In her art studies at UCLA and in her early work as a young artist, Chicago worked within the traditional masculine framework that defined art.
You can't grow up in our world without absorbing some of the messages about what it means to be a woman and what the expectations are.
As her consciousness grew, Chicago chose a different path, even freely choosing her own name in honor of her hometown.
I sort of rearrange my life to accommodate men's needs, and I learned not to do that anymore. And at that same time, I was searching for my own history as a woman, my own identity as a woman. Instead of denying that I'm a woman, I'm going to try and confront it and make it the center of my work. I wanted to try and put aside what had been imposed on me and rethink how a young woman might be educated to be herself as an artist.
Chicago started the first women's art program at Fresno State College.
So we took over this old house in downtown Los Angeles and turned it into Woman House, the first female-centered art installation, which caused a huge furor and was, got all this attention.
Woman House led to an art collective called Women's Space. In time, Chicago devoted herself to solo work again, along with several years on her famous collaborative piece, The Dinner Party. This hugely ambitious work, based on Chicago's research into women's history, featured china painting by Chicago and needlework sewn by a group of skilled craftswomen. The controversial work took years to find broad recognition.
All these people have come together over the years to make sure the dinner party would continue to have a life, to not be lost. I didn't have any big major dealers. I didn't have any big museums behind me. All I had was the power of my art. That's all I've ever had.
In order to find distribution for her next collaborative work, The Birth Project, Chicago formed Through the Flower, a nonprofit association named for one of her earlier works.
Chicago's major installation, the Holocaust Project, continued her dedication to create art that people cared about and that resonated deeply within her.
I started thinking about the fact that even though I had been raised in Jewish values, I really knew very little about the history of what it meant to be a Jew or about Jewish practice, and I knew nothing about the Holocaust.
Over an exhausting 8-year period, Chicago created the 32-piece Holocaust Project with her husband, photographer Donald Woodman.
And we wanted to bring it out of the Jewish community and make it visible and understandable to a larger community. We were known as Miss Gloom and Mr. Doom. Nobody would invite us to dinner because we were depressing. All we could talk about was the Holocaust. She's very good at conceptualizing. And has this incredible ability of reading across subject matter to find material and source information.
Through my study of the Holocaust and our immersion in this material, I began to see women's oppression in a larger structure of global injustice and oppression, and realized that actually the whole world had to be transformed, because none of us know what the outcome of, what's going to happen in the world. So, we can give in to despair, or we can insist on being hopeful.
Chicago's message of hope emerged in her next collaborative project, Resolutions, A Stitch in Time, which illustrated several familiar proverbs. Judy Chicago continues work in her home in New Mexico at the magnificently restored Boleyn Hotel she shares with Woodman, or across the street at Through the Flower. She also continues to teach.
Working with Judy Chicago, she's not as difficult as everyone thinks she is to work with. She's very receptive to ideas, and we collaborate very, very well.
I think that what I've been trying to do is share my own vision of what art can be and what art might have the capacity to become.
When Dorrit Burn became CEO and president of Charming Shops, she created a place for herself at the top of the male-dominated retail fashion industry. She credits her mother as her inspiration.
I was terribly proud of my mother, and she was really a pathfinder. And every time she was promoted, every time that she achieved something, I just said, I'm going to be like Mom. My father passed away when I was about 11 or 12. And my mother had to go to work. So I was the young lady who was at home alone, and Mom was out working.
Dorrit Burn was highly motivated and, like Judy Chicago, felt entitled to the same work choices and success as men.
I majored in business just for that reason. I knew that I wanted to go into the retail business, and I went through a formalized executive training program for a department store chain called Allied Stores, and then just started working my way up.
The next significant rung up the ladder was a call from Sears, Roebuck & Company, which wanted to capitalize on Burn's abilities in fashion retailing with Allied to take Sears in that same direction.
So I was the first woman in my position. I was 37 years old, so about 12 years younger than the next executive in that position, and I was an outsider, the first in 100 years.
Burn went on to hold key positions at Sears, Roebuck & Company.
Essentially, I was running about a $3 billion business. And in addition to that, they decided to give me the home fashions business. And that entire structure, that silo of executives, I think it was 75 or 80,000 people that worked for me. So I wanted to be a CEO.
In 1995, Burn received another momentous phone call in her career.
Fashion Bug came to me and said, we want you to be the CEO. Oh, by the way, we're in financial trouble. Oh, by the way, we're a minute away from bankruptcy. Actually, I find that the easiest time to lead. As long as you have the vision and you're passionate about that vision and you're absolutely certain that where you're going and what you need to do is the right thing to do, the organization falls in step. When the Fashion Bug organization, Charming Shops, which is the parent, contacted me, I was excited about the idea of being a CEO. But to be a CEO of a strategy that isn't going to work, there certainly wouldn't be any reason to come.
But Burn had a strategy that would work. First, to reorganize the company's entire infrastructure. Burn's next strategy? To move the stores into strip malls for customer convenience and lower rents.
The theme that I talked to Wall Street about, what I talked to the banks about, because we did owe quite a bit of money to quite a few banks, was that we are going to take fashion from the mall and bring it to the strip for that time-starved female consumer. So what else was going on in America? Americans were putting on weight. Americans were getting bigger. And that wasn't going to change, in my opinion. And what is an underserved market? Plus sizes.
In 1999, Burn led Charming Shops to purchase the Modern Woman chain, the Catherine stores in 2000, and in 2001, the nation's largest plus-size chain, Lane Bryant. Finally, Charming Shops believes in encouraging young fashion students at Moore College of Art and Design to reach their potential through the Charming Shops, Inc. Endowed Scholarship.
We found Moore to be a very good partner, not only because of the fashion direction and the artistic approach that they brought, but their values seemed to resonate with what we wanted to do at Charming Shops.
People are looking for talent. People are looking for someone that can move this industry forward, and you can be unbelievably successful at something that you're passionate and care about.
Wilhelmina Cole was raised in upstate New York and attended Elmira College, where she majored in art and later did graduate work at the University of Paris. Her grandmother, Gertrude Strong, helped develop Wilhelmina's appreciation of beauty and her eye for art. Wilhelmina married Wallace Holliday, and they had 2 sons. In the 1960s, the Hollidays decided to develop an art collection. The focus for the collection was revealed to them on a trip to Europe.
We were in Europe, and we saw the work, beautiful work, of a woman named Clara Peters at the National Museum at Austria. We went on to the Prado in Spain and again saw her works, and yet neither one of us knew Clara Peters. I had studied history of art here and in Paris, had worked at the National Gallery of Art, was on the board of a museum, and I had never heard of Clara Peters. And my husband is equally interested in art, has a master's in architecture and so forth. So we came home and we got out all of our source books and we made a discovery. There wasn't one woman in any of our books.
The Hollidays decided to challenge this inequity and address the lack of representation for women artists. They spent 20 years assembling the world's finest collection of women's art. As their strategy unfolded, more galleries purchased women's art, and the Hollidays' social and educational cause to promote women's art took hold.
We're lucky. We've traveled all over the world. So wherever we went, we would go into the top commercial gallery and we'd say, "What do you have by a woman?" They'd say, "Nothing." We'd say, "Well, that's what we're interested in." 6 months later, knowing that we were a prospective purchaser, they would call us up and say, "We found a beautiful painting by a woman from the Renaissance or from the 18th century French, 17th century Dutch." And this is how we put the collection together.
In 1980, with the support of Nancy Hanks, former chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, Wilhelmina Cole Holliday founded the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Initial tours of the collection were conducted in her home, while she worked to create a dedicated site for the museum.
We were able to gather people who had clout in the financial world, the social world, the museum world, etc.
In 1983, the museum purchased the landmark Masonic Temple, an almost 80,000 square foot building on New York Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C., and began a 4-year renovation project. Its design led to numerous architectural awards, and in the spring of 1987, the National Museum of Women in the Arts opened the doors of its permanent location, with the Hollidays' works as the heart of the permanent collection.
As a matter of fact, until the year this museum opened, 1987, there wasn't one woman in the leading text in our country when you study history of art. It's called Jansen's History of Art. It means that anyone who went to school and studied history of art before 1987 simply doesn't know women artists. We are now one of the 10 largest museums in the world when measured by membership.
Members and thousands of other museum visitors can enjoy the growing permanent collection with more than 3,000 works from the 16th century to today's most contemporary forms. There are also special exhibitions and distinctive collections. After almost 20 years, the legacy of Wilhelmina Cole Holliday is assured, thanks to her unwavering vision for a place to celebrate women's art through the ages and into the future. Faith Ringgold's art and writing resonate with her rich cultural heritage and her unflinching desire to address social injustice. Faith was raised in Harlem and credits her tenacious spirit and artistic success to a happy childhood and parents who supported her art from the very beginning.
Really, I always attribute my interest in being an artist to the fact that I had asthma as a child. And consequently, I was home a lot, in bed, and it gave me time to myself, out of school. I was going to City College. I was told that I could major in art and minor in education, and that way I could get a degree in art education, which my family was so happy about, because then that meant I could be a teacher.
Prior to teaching, Faith married and had 2 daughters. But she always worked on her art, although finding a gallery to represent what she called her superrealism was a challenge in the early 1960s. At the time, she was influenced by writers James Baldwin and Amiri Baraka. Faith joined the Spectrum Gallery in 1967.
In the beginning, of course, in the 60s, with my political art forms, I mean, people just weren't interested. They didn't want the work, they didn't like the work, they didn't like the subject matter of the work, the American People series, and it had to do with the Civil Rights Movement. The Flag is Bleeding, Die, the Black Power postage stamp, you know, really big, telling kinds of confrontations between black and white people. I was trying to comment on my time. I was trying to be one of the voices, one of the people who had something to say, you know, and I was trying to tell my story.
Faith's social activism continued in the 1970s. She was a feminist, an activist, and championed the rights of black artists for equal representation in major galleries. She returned to teaching, including several years at University of California at San Diego. And her beloved mother, Willie Posey Jones, a highly regarded fashion designer in Harlem, helped Faith design and sew costumes, and later, her first quilt. Mrs. Jones also took Faith and her granddaughters on European vacations, including to the Louvre in Paris. This was immortalized in one of Faith's most famous series of quilts, Dancing at the Louvre. Prior to making quilts, Faith also made tonkas, or cloth-framed paintings.
Because the tonkas were good, but they were limited as to how big you could make them. Whereas a quilt, you could make a quilt the size of this room. This is an art form that was very important as an art form during slavery, came over here from Africa.
Of all the art forms Faith Ringgold has created, story quilts embody her mastery of narrative, stunning composition, and vibrant colors. Tar Beach, the first book Faith wrote for children, and which originated from a story quilt she created several years earlier, won the distinguished Caldecott Award for Children's Literature.
When I was a child, growing up in Harlem, and we used to go up on Tar Beach, my father would take up a mattress, and my mother and father and friends would be playing cards. And everybody would be on their rooftops. But the story I made up of this little girl who has all this wonderful power. Because kids always think, even though they're little, they think that they have some influence over their family's future. I was not trying to write a children's story. I was simply writing a story that would recall my childhood. And I was telling my story, which is what I've been doing right through all of my experience as an artist.
Faith Ringgold went on to write and illustrate several more best-selling children's books, and a stunning compilation of her work was published in 2004. Her autobiography was published in 2005, and she paints every day. This prolific artist has won numerous awards and almost 20 honorary doctorates, including her very first one from Moore College of Art and Design. Faith continues to exhibit nationally to educate, challenge, and inspire. Mary Ellen Mark's photographic images are widely known through her exhibitions, photo essays, commercial work for magazines, and numerous publications. American Photo magazine readers selected her as the most influential woman photographer of all time. Mary Ellen grew up in the Philadelphia area.
I just wanted to have fun and have lots of friends, and I was always interested in drawing and painting, and then I would always look through old scrapbooks of photographs. I always wanted my independence and my freedom. I wanted to be really great at something, and I didn't know it was photography then, but I wanted a way to escape.
At the University of Pennsylvania, Mary Ellen studied painting and art history for her undergraduate degree, then received her master's in photojournalism.
Well, I started taking pictures when I was in the Annenberg School, and I went to Turkey on Fulbright, and then I came back and started to freelance as a photographer for magazines in New York.
One of Mary Ellen's first big breaks was as a still photographer on the movie set of Fellini's Satyricon.
The person that I admire most in the world as an artist was Fellini. That was the first film I worked on, and I think he's one of my great inspirations.
Mary Ellen continued to collaborate with and be inspired by filmmakers such as director Tim Burton.
It's an edgy, strange, and funny world, and I guess that's what I like to look at. Both humor and irony and all the things in this world that represent that, and sadness. I just always sought projects that dealt with people and also often people on the edges of our society.
Mary Ellen has always traveled extensively in her career, on independent projects and on assignment. Her unflinching yet compassionate viewpoint of the world's cultures is apparent in the photographs she takes. From her portraits of Mother Teresa to the brothels and circuses of Bombay, the emotional resonance of her work is unsurpassed.
Mostly I'm a black and white photographer, and I see things in black and white, and I prefer to work in black and white. And the Bombay Prostitutes was a perfect project for me to work in color, just because color was so much a part of the women's lives.
Mary Ellen Mark brilliantly captured the lives of runaway children in Seattle in the photo essay Streetwise, which also led to an award-winning film she produced, directed by her husband, Martin Bell. Her book, Twins, also led to a film collaboration between them. In addition to new documentary work, an active exhibition, workshop, and lecturing schedule, Mary Ellen works regularly on commercial ventures.
I'd like to feel that young people would respond to my images. I think it's very important to be, to follow those dreams and to photograph what you want to photograph, and be very strong about that.
The art world of Philadelphia has been enriched by the leadership of visionary woman Thora Jacobson. For 23 years, this Philadelphia native led the Samuel S. Fleischer Art Memorial. Now, she is bringing her expertise to the printmaking world as Chief Operating Officer of Philagraphica. Thora Jacobson felt stirrings to create art as a young girl.
Art making was really very much a part of my life. And my mother was a woman who really wished she had been an artist.
Thora became an art history and fine arts major at Trinity College in Washington, D.C.
When I was given an opportunity to work at Fleischer after spending 2 years at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, it really became the platform from which I learned almost everything.
The landmark Samuel S. Fleischer Memorial is the nation's oldest tuition-free art school, When Thora became executive director at Fleischer, she led highly successful capital campaigns and transformed the museum and school's operations. But it was her reputation at building collaborative relationships with other art organizations, such as the Philadelphia Print Collaborative, that led to her next important career move. The collaborative came together to make Philadelphia an international center for printmaking.
Philadelphia is a place that has nurtured artists as a center of education, as a center of production, as a center of collection and exhibition.
In March 2006, the new name, Philagraphica, was adopted in order to promote the city as a worldwide printmaking center and hold an international festival in 2010.
Printmaking and the printed image are at the core of what many artists use to develop their work, and that is at the heart of what Philagraphica will explore.
Through the collaborative model Thora honed at Fleischer and her ongoing partnerships with Philadelphia's art institutions, Philagraphica is set to promote the printed image as a valued art form and propel Philadelphia onto the international stage. What roles do art, gender, politics, and society play with the artist and viewer? How can work by women artists be advanced? Through her provocative exploration of such questions, Linda Nochlin changed the study of art history. Her unique vision, tenacity, and broad-ranging intellect led to her distinguished 40-year career as an art critic, historian, and educator. A childhood immersed in the arts in Brooklyn, New York may have been the wellspring of her inspiration.
I painted and I danced and I wrote poetry and I loved music. The arts were, I didn't know I wanted to go into them in any sense, but I always knew I loved them, and that's where I felt most at home.
Linda majored in philosophy at Vassar and received a master's degree in 17th century English literature from Columbia. Linda earned her doctorate in art history from the Institute of Fine Arts at New York University, and she wrote her dissertation on painter Gustave Courbet. She became an international expert on Courbet and on Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and Realism. She served as professor of art history at Vassar, Yale, the City University of New York, and now teaches at the Institute of Fine Arts at New York University. But it was at the close of the turbulent 60s that her feminist consciousness was raised, and she changed the content of an art history course to reflect her new thinking.
I just come back from Italy. I've been married again. I was back in the United States and somebody told me, there's the women's liberation movement, you should think about it. She left me some of the early writings of the women's liberation, Red Stocking newsletter and Off Our Backs. And I stayed up almost all night reading, and then that's what made me change my course.
In 1971, Linda Nochlin wrote her seminal essay, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists? A few years later, she co-curated a groundbreaking exhibition on women artists.
I mean, it's hard enough just to be an artist, but to try and be an artist who was not a white male. Even if you were Van Gogh having fits or poor and an outsider and so on, of all those people who were going to be artists, they were all going to be white males, right? And women were always sort of sidelined. They were never permitted access to the highest ambition. The whole field has to change for justice to be done.
The many acclaimed books Linda Nochlin wrote on art, politics, and power have contributed to a changing belief system, one that is giving women artists more opportunities.
I think that an artist should be free to do what she wants. And I think the best artists today are free.
Linda recently co-curated the opening exhibition of Global Feminisms at the Elizabeth A. Sackler Center for Feminist Art, published a seminal work on Courbet, and lectures internationally.
I really love good art. Feminist, non-feminist, doesn't matter. That's what I care about.
Amalia Baynes is an artist, educator, activist, cultural critic, and advocate. Since 1995, She chaired the Department of Visual and Public Art at California State University at Monterey Bay. Amalia's own education spans several fields, and she has blended them seamlessly throughout her career.
I went to San Jose State, and when I graduated in a degree in painting, I found myself unemployed, so I went back to school again. And so I got a master's at San Francisco State, and I taught for a number of years, and then I went back again. And I got another master's and a PhD in clinical psychology from the Wright Institute in Berkeley.
Amalia grew up in Santa Clara, California. Her artistic extended family, who emigrated from Mexico, was the inspiration for her multi-layered career.
I felt very loved and cared for. The hardest part was negotiating being two different kinds of people, one in the American world and then the other one at home. And my parents were fairly acculturated in some way also, because they'd come when they were very young. It was definitely a more traditional upbringing, which served me well, because later the ideas that I had in the Chicana movement of reclaiming culture and spiritual practices really came out of the lived experience I had as a child. We were Chicanos, and that meant that we had a heritage and a political direction. So that has always been a kind of foundation for me to do the work I do. I am not alone. I have never been alone. It's a collective process. And I think of art as not only having a purpose, but that art can serve a community.
Amalia pioneered the use of installation art to tell stories of the Chicana experience. She has curated many important Latino art exhibitions. She was Commissioner of Arts for San Francisco, is widely published, and lectures internationally.
In many respects, all of the work that I've done as a psychologist, as a teacher, as an advocate, even as a media person, and as an artist, have all led to the same thing. And they really have to do with how culture can inspire people to face difficult situations.
Amalia uses traditional religious altars as the iconic Chicana element in her work. She portrays themes such as Catholic ritual, Mexican imagery and history, and female rites of passage.
For me, the altars were a form of art, but they were more than that. They were a way to build community, a way to establish for others a collective memory, but ultimately, I think at their most intimate level, they are my spiritual practice.
What Amalia does with her work and installation is that she holds you by the hand and walks you through an experience and a moment that is important to her and that has a lot of information, both cultural and spiritual information. I think that Amalia's vision it's about finding a comfortable place that you don't need to compromise.
I am never uncomfortable being called a Chicana artist, never. There are some people that feel that's a pigeonhole, and I always say, well, pigeons always come back home.
When she won the 1992 Distinguished MacArthur Fellowship, Amalia's world changed in many ways.
I think for me, the MacArthur was more than any other thing a kind of vindication. At the very same year that I received the MacArthur, someone got a MacArthur for the study of the Roman Empire. And I remember thinking to myself, so the study of Chicano art is the same value as a study of the Roman Empire. My emphasis on women in the work that I do and in organizing and curating shows really comes out of an internal view of women within the Chicana community. The one ingredient that will move you forward is for you to develop your own sense of purpose. Why do you make this art? What do you make it about? Who do you make it for? And that purpose lasts you your lifetime.
Elizabeth Sackler promotes cultural continuity and recognizes the powerful role of women as artists. She does this through her significant philanthropic contributions to the arts.
I'm a native New Yorker, and I went to a wonderful school here, which was a progressive experimental school in the 60s. And it was there that I really became a social activist and a civil rights activist. I was nursed and weaned, if you will, on what it is to be a responsible person. But I guess I was fortunate because I genetically was encoded with both my mother and father's passion about participating in a really active way.
Elizabeth is president of the Arthur M. Sackler Foundation, which lends its vast collections of Asian art throughout the world. She is the founding president of the Friends of the Freer and Sackler Galleries of the Smithsonian Institution. Elizabeth's upbringing taught her that art is the lifeblood of a culture. Her respect for Native American culture influenced her to purchase Hopi and Navajo masks from a Sotheby's auction in 1992.
I went in to Sotheby's and I purchased the masks in order to return them, which is what I did. What I didn't expect was the outpouring of support that I got from both the Native nation and non-Native nation, and it began an entire movement of repatriation of American Indian artifacts from the private sector in this country.
Elizabeth draws a connection between her work for cultural repatriation and her philanthropy that supports feminist art.
I am first and foremost a social activist who has resources available and uses them to move forward some things that I think are extremely important, whether it is American Indian ceremonial material being returned to their homes or feminist art and feminism.
Elizabeth was able to exercise her ardent support for feminism through her gift of Judy Chicago's landmark piece, The Dinner Party, as the cornerstone of the Elizabeth A. Sackler Center for Feminist Art at the Brooklyn Museum.
We were talking about the dinner party, and Elizabeth passed over to me a catalog of the dinner party. Elizabeth said, "Would you like to have that?" And I, of course, thought she meant the catalog and said, "Oh, I'd be delighted to have that. I don't have this in my library, and I don't believe the museum has it in its library either." And Elizabeth looked at me somewhat incredulously and said, "I don't mean the catalog, I mean the dinner party, the installation itself."
The Dinner Party opened to great acclaim in March 2007. More college students visited the center at its opening. Judy Chicago's epic work uses ceramics, china painting, and needlework to create place settings honoring 39 historic figures.
To bring women's history and education to the public is vitally important. The Dinner Party Gallery within the center, this is, for me, this is a public historian's dream. The center is providing an opportunity for dialogue over art, politics, social, culture, different generations coming in with a different slant, with a different point of view.
Elizabeth Sackler has made good headway for many of her causes through her dedication and passion.
I think her primary issues are the issues of equity, of fairness, of equality, of the ethical treatment both of people and objects.
There was a vision that I held for the American Indian and still do, and there's this vision that I hold for women and women in the arts and feminist artists. But I have always held a vision of a world which is equitable and where human beings are really decent and moral and kind.
Mary McFadden combined her love and deep respect for ancient art, sculpture, and textiles from varied cultures to set new trends, yet create designs that endure for decades.
I was first influenced by Egyptian design and, of course, by Greek drapery. And those two visions passed through all the collections. What differentiated each collection from the other was the period of time, whether it be Etruscan, whether it be from Pompeii. But I thought that they had achieved exquisite beauty, and I wanted to bring it out in my own collections.
Her world travel and her interest in every variety of culture all around the world has created in her a timeless quality that I think is as at home with the gods of ancient Egypt as it is in the modern world. I think that Mary has culled the finest examples of every civilization that she has plumbed the depths of.
While Mary was born and raised in New York, her early childhood was spent on the family's cotton farm and estate. Mary's paternal roots were in Philadelphia. Her mother's family was prominent in New York society. Both families were avid art collectors. Mary's grandmother took her on holidays to Paris and introduced her to the world of art and fashion.
My grandmother had given me a beautiful 4-inch diamond bracelet, of which at that time I was still a tomboy. And so I traded in the diamond bracelet for my first important piece of art, which was a piece of drawing by Salvador Dali.
Mary took courses in anthropology and sociology at the Sorbonne, Columbia University, and the New School. She attended the Trapphagen School of Design, where she studied the 1,000 stitches of the world. Mary's enterprising spirit landed her an interview for her first job with an executive for Christian Dior, whom she met at a party in New York.
I said to him, I don't know anything about public relations, but you don't have to pay me for the first 3 months. And if you don't like my work at the end of the 3 months, you can fire me. Or, if you like my work, I would like to be paid in kind. I would like to have 15 each collection dresses of Christian Dior New York and 15 of Christian Dior Paris. So at the end of the 3 months, he liked my work. And so I've continued in that job for 3 years until I went to South Africa.
Mary's first marriage to a De Beers diamond executive led to her move to Africa.
It was also at that time that I was asked by Diana Vreeland to become editor of Vogue South Africa.
When Vogue South Africa closed, Mary continued to write for other publications in South Africa. During her travels, Mary acquired an extensive African sculpture collection.
When I built my own sculptural school at Vakutu in Zimbabwe, I had maybe 3,000 pieces of sculpture. I was selling the sculptures to about 23 different countries around the world.
Mary also began to collect beautiful textiles for her own clothing in Africa. When life there became too unstable, she and her daughter returned to America in 1970. About that time, Diana Vreeland asked Mary to join Vogue New York. That move would launch a celebrated fashion career.
I had found on my journalistic trips some beautiful cloth, and I cut them into beautiful tunics and togas and very simplistic patterns, which is classic of African design. And I started wearing them. Those were the dresses that when I came back to America and became editor of Vogue America, that I wore to the office, and they were also the basis, the beginnings of my couture collection.
With funds from the sale of her modern art collection and a technical staff, Mary was on her way. By 1975, she felt she was fully ready for 7th Avenue.
And first we worked on China silk, and then we did patterns over the China silk, and of course nothing stayed. So it was a long time, I think another 3 months before I found a very delicate polyester satin back in Australia. I found that fiber, which is very transparent, and I took it to Japan, and there I had it converted and colored and brought back to the United States, where I started developing all these various pleating techniques. And that was called Mari pleating, and I patented it under Mari pleating.
Mary's couture business stayed grounded in quilting, pleating, and unique fabric designs.
It's a deceptively simple form, but there's always this depth that not only gives it stature, but gives it, a real sensuality.
After that became the jewelry. They were all in hand-forged brass dipped in 22-karat gold. They were also inspired by archaeology and ancient civilizations. Then came home furnishings. Then came beds and linen. Then I designed carpets, furniture, and anything you could think of we started making.
Mary decided it was time to close the business in 2003.
Well, I figured I had done 70 collections, no, maybe 90 collections of couture. And I had covered every civilization that there was to cover.
Mary McFadden's contributions to the world of fashion and design and to uplifting cultures around the world are immeasurable.
I think the greatest challenge for anyone, man or woman, is really being true to who you are in an important way, in a disciplined and rigorous way. Mary's done that more than just about anybody I know.
Well, I think the most important thing is to find a unique expression in your work. You can't ever copy anyone, because then you'll just be like the multitudes.
Women artists and designers may face obstacles to their chosen careers. Yet the visionary women honored by Moore College of Art and Design demonstrate that success is possible with focus, a unique approach, and unwavering determination.